Thank you, Igor. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to soho, IOActive. For those that haven't met yet, I'm Barrie, IOActive's Director of Penetration Testing. Tonight I'm going to talk about ham radio. And the goal of this presentation is for you guys in the room to leave here, go home and get a license. That's what I want to do today, is convince you to get licensed. And you'll find out why throughout this presentation. I'll show you some of the stuff that I've been doing, some of the stuff that I think is interesting, and why it's kind of closely related to the type of work that you do if you're in this industry. You can ask questions throughout. Whenever we're on a topic and you want to ask a question about that topic, just throw your hand up and ask a question, and then there'll be opportunity for questions and stuff at the end. So don't worry about interrupting as we go. Ask the questions when they pop up. I'm IOActive's Director of Penetration Testing, but for tonight, I am 2 Mike 0 Oscar Delta Echo, which is my call sign in amateur radio. For any of you guys that are already licensed or know anything about licensing, you'll know that that's incorrect, because if I'm in Scotland, that's my call sign, but in England, I would have to change it. And you would learn that if you got licensed. If any of you guys pick up any of these radios and push the transmit button, you're breaking the law. It's illegal to transmit on any frequency with this radio. Doesn't matter what the frequency is. Not just the ham radio frequencies, just any frequency at all. It's illegal for you to transmit on that button, and it has been since 1904. Prior to that, when Hertz first experimented with spark gap transmissions, which is kind of where he proved that radio waves existed, and then Marconi commercialized that, there was no real regulation, and then regulation kind of came into place. But these guys were amateurs messing around with radio, and right up until this day, that tradition's continued. So amateurs have a space throughout the bands where we can mess around with radio, we can have fun. We just have to go through a licensing process, and it's not that onerous. It's really quite simple, and most of the guys in this room could go through this process pretty simply. When I did my initial foundation assessment, which I'll explain to you guys, I was able to pass the mock exams that they had online on the RSGB's website just with general knowledge that I had, and I didn't have a radio background. I'm a hacker, I work on code, I do some hardware stuff, but I'm not even as good as the IOActive hardware guys. Just knowing the difference between FM and AM was enough for me to, and having played around with SDRs was enough for me to just pass that mock exam. So with a little bit more studying, I was able to really easily get my first level of a amateur radio license, and I'm going to show you guys exactly how you can do that in the UK. So if you go online, a lot of these presentations are very US centric. There aren't a lot that are UK centric. So the licensing and legal part of this presentation is UK centric. Everything else is global. Everything else that I mentioned is global, and we're kind of doing this stuff around the world. We won't really be talking about things like Meshtastic or anything like that, and we won't really be talking about SDR, although I will mention it a lot because it's kind of now interwoven with amateur radio. It's kind of part of what we do. Even the physical radios that we buy are now SDR radios inside them. So if you guys have worked with some SDR in the past, you'll have some knowledge. Yeah, go ahead.
So where does Marine Band fit into this?
So Marine Band has its own license that you have to go get separately, and you can't. So you can transmit, if you got an amateur radio license, you can go out in the water and you can transmit, and what I would have to do is add maritime mobile on the end of my call sign, but I couldn't transmit on marine bands unless I had a separate marine band license, which is entirely different from amateur radio licensing. And there's a few other licenses that you can get. I can speak to, we'll talk about this later in the presentation, I can speak to a pilot in an airplane if he's an amateur radio operator and he's operating on amateur bands, but I can't speak to him on the air traffic bands. I can't speak to him on any of those. So there's loads of different licenses that you can have for specialist parts that you're working in, aeronautical, maritime, stuff like that. But amateur really easy to get. And and I think for maritime, I think you do like there's a cost and then like a really short questionnaire, right?
Yeah, it's about 2 days, RAY, something like that.
Yeah.
Pretty simple.
Yeah, quite easy to get. So this is similar to that, really similar to that. So is it illegal to listen? Anybody know? No. No? Lots of no's.
It depends.
Lots of no's. Depends. Who said it depends? What does it depend on?
Well, for example, you can't listen to like mobile stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Protected bands are illegal, but like unprotected is okay for listening.
So it's kind of grey, and you can see that. So we've got a bunch of technical guys in the room, and we've got people saying that it's not illegal to listen to anything, which is what I believe as well. And I'm a cybersecurity expert. Like I'm an expert in this area, and primarily I'm an expert in the laws of this area too. So going back a few years, I would have said it's not illegal to listen to anything. If you read the law, the Wireless Telegraphy Act of 2006 is quite clear. So it is illegal. There are two parts to it. One is listening with the intent to obtain the contents of the message that is not for you. That's what it says. That's any message. Right? There are no further restrictions to it than that. Any message, any band, if it's not intended for you, it's technically illegal to listen. And the second part is disclosing what you have heard. So if you go online, I have a sort of aviation interest as well. So I listen to air traffic control recordings that have been put online. So you guys might have seen some of this where there's been like an incident, there's been a crash, or there's been like an argument between air traffic control and some pilots. They're all American. There are no UK ones posted online, because the reality is, in the UK at least, that we don't generally find that people are prosecuted unless they take action. So if you're just listening at home, it's technically illegal, but practically we're not doing anything about it. Like nothing's happening. So Ofcom, I'm not coming to prosecute you if you're listening to air traffic control. If you record it and put it on YouTube, that's a different story. And if you interfere with it, that's a massive different story. People have definitely been prosecuted for that. So it is technically illegal to listen in the UK, but if you're at home listening with your scanner, you know, airband scanners are sold openly. It's not illegal to sell them, not illegal to own them, but it is technically illegal to listen into some of those conversations. And then some of the ones like police, ambulance, and fire, you can't listen to anyway because they're encrypted. There was vulnerabilities disclosed in them last year or the year before in the encryption that's in Tetra. But you know, if you could break through that, you would be breaking the law. So it is against the law to do it. It's just not practically enforced. No one's ever going to come around your house like, you know, and try and enforce these in any sort of way. So wouldn't worry about it too much, but don't get silly with it if you want to be a listener. And this is something I've done a lot of. I've done a lot of listening across all the bands, because it's the best way to learn about radio is to listen to whatever's out there on the band, right, and see what's there. So if you do want to transmit, so there's a couple of ways of doing it. We've heard about aeronautical, we've heard about maritime licenses as well. PMR is the most common way. So if you've ever bought like a 16-channel radio, one of the ones that you give to kids, like walkie-talkies, or one of the ones that you might use in a walking group or something, this is what's called PMR, private mobile radio. And that's unlicensed, but it's half a watt, and it's limited to, you're not allowed to change the antenna. So that when you buy those radios, they don't have removable antennas like these ones have. And that's to prevent you putting a high gain antenna on it and then operating that radio and being able to contact people like over longer distances. And the half watt has like a similar limitations. You can't really transmit too far. And the reason for those limitations on both the antenna and the wattage is so that you can't cause problems for other people on the spectrum. And that's the whole point of the laws, is to prevent you causing problems for other people on the spectrum. So if you buy this, you can't really use this for anything serious. And we'll talk about some of the serious users in a later slide, and some of the problems that they have and what we solve for them as amateur radio operators, how we help them. These are almost a waste of money. They're kids' toys, basically. You'll go a couple of miles at best, and that's without buildings and stuff in the way. Any more than that, you're not going to have a lot of fun with them. But they're license free. You can pick them up for pennies, and great if you're like in the house. A lot of schools use them inside the school, which is a terrible thing to do because they're completely open and anyone can listen to them. They have privacy codes, but privacy codes are just subaudible tones that let you block out other people coming to your radio, but we can still hear you, still hear everything you're doing. And we can pull out that subaudible tone if we know anything about radio, and we can just inject in if we want. There's like no secrecy, no privacy there. People think there is, but there isn't. So that's one way of transmitting. Another way, CB radio, almost dead now, but it still exists. People still use it. And PMR guys, people do use PMR outside of the licensed restrictions. They do use it with one of these radios, because these radios are all PMR capable, but to do so would be illegal. People do use them. They put big antennas up. They put amplifiers on them. They reach massive distances. There's Facebook groups and Discord groups where guys will arrange to have a regular meeting. There's the 8 at 8 one, which is channel 8, 8 o'clock on a Sunday night, where all the guys will run up hills and stuff and all have like a big meeting online, and they'll just talk about radios on PMR, unlicensed. And every single one of those guys is using some sort of illegal radio when they're doing it. And they're not getting prosecuted because they're not generally causing problems for other users. And as soon as you start causing problems for other users, that's when the prosecution starts to come in. And the same with CB. CB is supposed to be limited to 4 watt. I have never seen anyone operate a CB radio at 4 watt. All of the CB radios I've ever seen have been amplified, and all the antennas have been massive. So, you know, I've never seen a legal CB radio. And my mum had one, my uncle had one, I've known friends to have one. I've never seen a legal one. I don't know if you guys have had any CB exposure. No one operates CB legally, and no one does anything about it, again, because they're not causing problems for anyone else on the bands. So again, so that's multiple technically illegal things that people generally get away with in the UK because there's no enforcement on it. Me, on the other hand, I like to play by the rules. So I'll bend the rules, I won't break them. I got licensed. And the reason I got licensed was because I was doing a lot of radio adjacent work. And this is where it comes in for you guys, because I think that getting licensed and learning about how it all works is super useful for a lot of the stuff that we do in our industry. It's certainly been really useful for me, who didn't really have a physics background prior to getting involved in the security work that IOActive does, and constantly having to self-learn on, you know, all the missing maths and physics stuff that you have as you're picking up new concepts. So you get access to everything all the way up through microwave. You can transmit on all of these bands, and you get a lot more power. And we'll talk about exactly how much power you get as we go through, but you can get up to a kilowatt on your full license. I have never needed that much to do anything. All of my stuff, which we'll see in a second, has been on the much lower power end. Interesting point that I discovered when I was looking this up is that amateur radio is older than the BBC's license. So we were being licensed before the BBC was being licensed to do their work. And then commercial licensing came after the BBC, because they were government funded. The first commercial radio station in the UK was a few decades after the BBC. These are our airwaves. They belong to us. So we should be the ones that are hacking on them, developing on them, and that's what you do when you get licensed. You hack on them, you develop on them, and you make some cool stuff. And you'll see some of the cool stuff that's been made by the guys in this. There are some weird languages and weird codes and stuff that come up. You won't hear too many of them from me, but you will hear a couple as we go through, because they've got into my vocabulary now, and I can't get them out for some of the things. So Q codes are pretty common in amateur radio. The most common ones that I generally hear are QTH, which is where you're from, and you can say these as a statement or a question. So QTH with a question and inflection, or a question mark if it's through Morse code or a digital medium of some kind. is asking someone, where they are. QSL is, did you receive this? How well did you receive it? And QSL as a statement is, yeah, I got it, and it came through.
Right. Are any of those sort of abbreviations to be stand for something?
No, what they are, they're musical codes based, some of them are abbreviations, but most of them are musical codes that came from the telegraph, right? So that's how Morse code was invented. Morse code was invented as a way to speed up telegraphs, because waiting for the dots and dashes to be written out, on the paper was too slow, and we decided to just do it in our heads and listen to the noise of the tape, and then we created the sound from it. The sound came later. That's what these are. So these are sounds that you can hear and immediately go, that's a QSL, that's a QTH. So a common one is SOS, right? The SOS signal is da-da-da, dash da-da-da, da-da-da, right? It's not the letter S, the letter O, the letter S. It's one musical sound, the SOS sound, that's what it is. So that's what these are. These are one musical sound as well. And when you're learning Morse code, which I did, and you start to separate letters and thinking about musical sounds and hear them as like a single acoustic sound, it becomes much easier to understand and read what you're picking up. So that's what they're designed. And the Q bit at the start lets you know it's not a letter that's commonly used to start words, so it starts these codes. And then you hear the Q, you're like, okay, this is probably going to be a Q code and not a word, right? Because we're not really telegraphing loads and loads of Q words, right? So it's a good letter to use to have in these. So that's pretty common on the band. You'll hear them, and if you're listening in, and I'm going to show you how to do that later, you can look these up. The other one that you will hear me saying all the time is, instead of saying a frequency, I will say a length in meters. And the reason for this is, when you build antennas, you build the legs of the antenna based on ratios to the wavelength of the whatever frequency you're working on, right? So if you're working on 2 meters, which is around about 145 megahertz, the wavelength for that frequency is going to be 2 meters long. So in amateur radio, to shortcut the frequencies, and when we're speaking to each other, we will use 2 meters rather than 144 megahertz, because it helps other amateur radio operators kind of know what we're talking about, where we're likely to be, and it helps you visualize the types of antennas that can be built and what they've got designed. So if I'm speaking to someone and they say, oh, I built a dipole antenna for 2 meters, I know exactly what that looks like, exactly what that antenna looks like. Just from that description, because I know what dipoles are, I know how they work, I know what size you need to do for 2 meters, and that is far more useful to amateur radio operators than frequency. I don't really care about the frequency, I care about the length of the wavelength, because when I'm building antennas, that's the metric that matters for us for the most part. So we'll talk about 20 meters and 40 meters and 6 meters, rather than 7 megahertz, 14 megahertz, and that's how we do it. So you'll hear me say that throughout the presentation, because I can't help it now, because I've been doing so much amateur radio stuff. And I found that quite odd to start with, until I started building antennas. I was like, okay, this makes a lot of sense. This makes a lot of sense now. There are some numbers that are used. Usually when you hear a number, you will hear signal reports giving us numbers. And then the only one that really is retained from the wireless telegraphy days, quite commonly, is signing off with 7-3. And that's just best wishes, best regards, thank you for the contact. And we kind of say that at the end of everything that we do. So those are the things you want to look up if you want to go and listen to this more. And the one in the middle is the one that you will now hear throughout the slide. So if you don't know what the frequency is, when I say 2 meters or 40 meters, and you're like, I have no idea what that is, take 300 and divide it by that number, and that gives you the frequency, because it's based on the speed of light. So it's the speed of light divided by the wavelength gives you the frequency. So you can shortcut that by going 300 divided by 2 meters will give you 145 or thereabout for the frequency that we're looking at. The speed of light is slightly slower than 300,000 kilometers a second, something like that it is. So that's how we get the wavelength, that's how we calculate it, and that's how we build an antenna. So we just use that wording. We use that wording quite a lot. So couple of parts coming up. Traditional hobby, some of the stuff that I think is useful for hackers, and then what the modern hobby is kind of looking like, and the stuff that I think is like super interesting nowadays, and the stuff that keeps me busy. So if you guys have had any knowledge of awareness of amateur radio, ham radio, the first vision you have is old guy in his shack, lots of radios, talking to another old guy halfway around the world, complaining about his sore back or problems with his pancreas, right? And we still do that. I'm really good at it. And this is how it's done. So local communication is done over UHF and VHF. So this is 2 meters and 70 centimeters, right? You guys, 70 centimeters math is hard because it's you have to do a decimal to figure this one out. It's line of sight, and comparing this to a mobile phone, right? Your mobile phone doesn't go around the world, right? Your mobile phone goes a couple of miles at best to the nearest cell tower. You don't have a cell tower near you, it's a useless brick, right? Doesn't do anything. Radio can go a lot further than that. What we generally do is we have local chat with people that we know locally. I've made a lot of friends through this. Some I've met face to face, some I haven't. And we've got a whole bunch of further activities that I do. This is one of the parts that I use most in amateur radio, which I had no idea was going to happen. I thought this was dead. I thought local chat on radios to people, and when I say local, I'm talking 40, 50 mile radius from like where you live. I was like, I live in a small town in Scotland. There's no one near me going to speak. I speak to people every day on this constantly. My wife can attest to that. She's in the audience, and she hears me every day with the hiss of the radio and stuff, talking to these guys all over the place. But it is line of sight, so that's a problem because I've got one area of where we live that I can speak to, and I've got a whole other area that I can't because there's a couple of massive hills in the way, and there's like nothing we can do there. So similar to cell technology, we have repeaters, and the way that they work is we have somewhere high up on a hill, a self-contained radio with a giant mast, and we go into that radio on one frequency, and it repeats out on another frequency exactly what you sent to it. And what that lets you do is it lets you go over that hill, right? So if it's on top of a big hill, you can hit it from down here, and then the guy at the other side of the hill can pick up your signal, and then you can go a lot further. And then we've enhanced it even more than that. Some of them are internet connected. So I can go into a repeater in Scotland on my radio and come out of a repeater in New Zealand if they're digitally connected. It's much similar to the cellular network. This is super useful for emergency communications. So we've got these all over the country. And when I say all over the country, I mean all over the country. This is where they are. This is your 2 meter and your 70 centimeter repeaters in the UK. There's tons of them. You can go out, get a radio, connect to these in no time. And it's really easy to configure and set up. And when you first start using amateur radio, there's a high chance that the first time you speak to someone will be on one of these repeaters because it's the easiest way to find someone. Local operators will scan all the nearby repeaters. So my radio has got like a few interesting frequencies that I like to listen to, and all my local repeaters that I can hit from my house are in it. So if anyone will key up one of those repeaters, it will come to me, and I'll hear them and I'll respond if whatever they're saying is interesting, or if they sound like they want to speak. So quite often I'll hear there's a guy in Edinburgh. Whenever he goes shopping with his wife, he'll drop her off to go shopping. He'll park his car up, and he'll just call out and be like, "I'm out shopping with my wife. Is anyone around? I've got nothing to do. I just want to talk." And then we hop on the radio and we speak. And I've made a few friends doing that kind of thing. So the repeater network is huge. This is just the UK. We're not the only country that does it. It's all over the US. It's all over Europe. Repeaters are everywhere. And some of them are digitally linked. So when you speak into a repeater, you may not just be spreading out over a couple of 100 miles. You might be going out wherever. If you want to go directly around the world, then you have to do something a bit more special than what we're doing, and that involves propagating your signal around the world, right? So the signal for VHF and UHF will go line of sight, hit a hill, stop. And if you shoot it up the way, it'll go straight up through the atmosphere into space. On the lower frequencies, anything under around about 50 megahertz, but the lower the better. You're better under 30 megahertz. That's going to bounce off the ionosphere, and it's going to bounce back off the ground and back off the ionosphere and go around the world. And this is how you make much longer contacts. This is how you get around the world. And this was the biggest part of amateur radio up until recent years, where people were super excited to talk around the world. The internet slowed that down quite a bit, because people are like, well, I could just go on IRC or whatever the modern equivalent of IRC is. I don't know. Teams, who would use that? So yeah, online chat and voice over IP kind of put a little bit of a dent in this, but it's still really quite cool to be able to get a signal around the world. And I'll talk about the first time that I did that and how I did it and how excited I was and how excited nobody else in the family was. They were like, you just pick the phone up and call them. But just now, we're in what's called solar cycle 25, which was predicted to be pretty good for radio. So solar weather affects radio because the ionization in the ionosphere makes this bounce possible to go around the world. And the more ionization we have, the better. So depending on the solar weather and how much of that has hit the world, then that'll affect how good radio is, right? So if you've got a season like we have just now, this is the best that we've had for 20 years. We're on the tail end of it, but it's still the best that we've had for 20 years, where there's a lot of ionization up there. If you send a signal up, it's going to bounce a lot, it's going to go far. This is the same weather that's given us the auroras. This picture was taken by my wife. She's a photographer, and she's a massive fan of Northern Lights. So she ran out at 1 o'clock in the morning to go take this picture, making her super happy. This made me unhappy because the aurora event scatters the ionization and makes it bad. So the fact that we get a lot of auroras makes ionization good, but the actual aurora event itself makes it bad. So in that couple of day period, it makes it bad for radio. But just now we're in a good peak for bouncing your signals around the world. There's a couple of problems with bouncing that around the world. Is if someone's in the skip zone where it bounces over them, they won't hear you. So you've got to be really careful where you're hitting and understand your radio, understand your antenna. If you want to speak to someone who's over in the next town, HF radio bouncing off the sky is probably not going to be the best way to make that work, because you've got to jump over them. You're going to have to angle your antenna, you're going to have to know the shape of your antenna's signal when it sends it out, because antennas don't send signals out equally in every direction. So you've got to know that information, know how it works, point it in the right direction, know what the sky is doing at that point in time, know what the time of the day is, because this stuff's HF radio is better in what's called the grey zone, which is dusk and dawn, because you've got that grey line that kind of moves across the world. So if you're in the grey zone and the person you're speaking to at the other side of the world is in the grey zone, you're probably going to be able to speak to them pretty well. But the people in between, you're going to have to be really careful about how you range, what you're doing, how you build your antenna, how you point your antenna to make that work. And there's a lot of skill involved in it that I had no idea about until I started building and working on this stuff. So just now is absolutely the best time to get licensed, because you're going to have the opportunity to put your radio up, send the signal out, and someone will come back to you, because it's going to be getting out, it's going to be getting far, and it's going to be doing well. And that's a lot of the frustration with radios, is people will start working on radios like, I can't hear anything, no one can hear me, what am I doing wrong? And it's really difficult to figure that out, because there's loads of little moving pieces in getting worldwide radio communication working. So that's primarily what the traditional stuff was like, and there was some competition and stuff involved in that. So people would be like, the most contacts you can get in a day. There's lots of weekend competitions that run. It's like, we're starting on this time, we're closing on this time. Whoever gets the most contacts wins a certificate and a prize and a gazillion internet points. It's changed a lot since then. So over about the last 20, 30 years, we have some changes to what we do on radio, and then some changes to the way that we operate that I have found a lot of fun, and I think you guys will find super interesting. So the first is digital data modes. So this gets really close to the day job for me, which is one of the reasons I don't do a lot of this, This is, so FT8 is the most common mode in amateur radio just now, if you just count the number of contacts. And that's because it's almost an unattended mode. You need a sound card hooked up to your radio and a computer to manage it. Some software runs on your computer, and the software pretty much does the contact for you. So you're not doing anything with your ears, it's all digital data that's been sent across. I don't find that hugely fun, but a lot of my friends and colleagues do. They find that massively fun, and they're trying to get like every grid square in the world where they've made a contact, or they try to do contacts with the least amount of power, and try to do it with a weak antenna, and giving themselves all sorts of challenges. So there are a lot of fun things that you can do with it. And again, there's competitions in this stuff. FT8 is only one of the modes that you can use for this. It's just one protocol. There are loads more protocols that you can use to do it. FT8's just become the most popular. There was FT4 before it, there's RTTY-based modes, there's PSK31, like dozens of modes that you can use to send and receive signals without using your voice. So this is good if you have issues with your voice, or you've got mic fright, you don't want to speak to randoms on the radio, which is super common, super common. I had some of it the first time I went to speak on the radio. I was super nervous when I first picked the radio up. What if I say the wrong codes at the wrong time? They say a Q code and I don't understand it. Like, what if I look like an idiot? So it's a great mode for that. Then there is Whisper. This one I do use, because what this is good for is testing out your antenna, because there's loads of modes that passively listen for Whisper out all over the world, and this is good for seeing what propagation is like. So if you want to know if that aurora or the solar weather has somehow affected the propagation, good or bad, compared to what it was like last week, you can send out signals and then figure out where you've been heard and see if that changes day by day. So I'm sure there's a few people in the room wondering, well, how would I know where I've been heard? So there are websites that will categorize that. So there are listeners out there that just listen all day long for like what you're saying, what you're sending out, and they upload it to WhisperNet and create graphs like this, showing you all the traffic that was going on. So this was taken last week. That was traffic that was going on, just Whisper traffic, just Whisper traffic going on last week. People testing out their antennas, seeing where they can get to, firing around the world. This is all amateur radio operators, not speaking to each other, just testing their antennas and figuring out where it is. So this is a super busy hobby. This is one day, just what's going on in like 1 hour of one day. Whisper's a great protocol for that, because it's quite easy to do. Again, sound card, hook up to a computer, plug it into your radio, let it run. And I find that way more useful to me, because I do a lot of messing around with antennas. So I know, well, in the book it says this antenna design is going to be better for what I'm doing than this antenna design, but let's test it, right? Let's go and mess around with it, right? And if you guys are in here with a hacker sort of mindset, that'll be fun to you, right? It was fun to me. So that sort of thing will be interesting and fun, and a good way to kind of build up some skills that are useful for some of the stuff that you'll do in work. But you can do it with your voice as well. So, yeah, Nick?
Quick, sort of slightly weird question. Does that distribution on the map sort of reflect the numbers of hobbyists around the world? Or
Reflect the numbers of what?
Hobbyists, or the number of transmitters?
Yeah, more or less. Yeah, more or less.
Russia, Mongolia.
Yeah, more or less. I mean, we do have people in pretty much every country doing it, but yeah, more or less it reflects where they are.
Yeah.
Yep. So digital voice modes. The most popular one is in the UK is DMR. If you ever get into amateur radio and you want to get into a digital voice mode and you don't know which one to choose that one. I didn't. I chose Yaesu, and it was a massive mistake. I love the Yaesu radios, and that's why I chose it. The menus on them are great, but DMR is the most popular mode in the UK. All the repeaters use it, and you're going to get access to a lot more stuff if you've got DMR. But give me 1 second. There is another solution. So you can get a device like this, So this is a Raspberry Pi on the bottom, and then an MMDVM hat on the top, which adds radio capabilities to the Raspberry Pi. So if you've already got a Raspberry Pi, get one of these is like super cheap. And then you just need any digital radio to connect to it, and you can do all of the modes. So this is my one that usually sits on my desk at home, and this is the interface for it. So you can see it does all of them. And it listens on a specific frequency, and it's set up in Yaesu System Fusion mode just now. So the way this little device works is it's basically a repeater, and it's internet connected. I connect into it using Yaesu digital, and then it connects into whatever network I want it to connect to using whatever digital they use. So if I want to go into a DMR chat room, I can hook it up to a DMR chat room. If I want to go into a D-Star network, I can hook up to a D-Star network. So my radio doesn't care what the other digital side of this is. My radio is doing Yaesu System Fusion. So this thing knows all the digital modes on the radio side, and it knows all the digital modes on the internet side. So you can use it as a bridge to connect to all of these digital modes. And it's really good because you don't need an antenna on the roof of your house, you don't need anything big, and you can talk to the entire world on this. And I listen into the Extended Freedom Network on this usually, which is what we're connected to just now. Because they have a lot of nets, which are, a net is like an online meeting controlled by a single person, and they let everyone have a chance to speak. And usually they're about a specific topic. So there used to be like a Raspberry Pi base net, it shut down a couple of years ago, where every Sunday we would just talk about Raspberry Pi stuff. But there would be a topic, so the guy who ran the meeting would be like, okay, tonight we're doing a quiz. And then it would go around everyone and it'd be like, when was the Pi invented? How many of them been sold? Like stuff like that, and you would have like a quiz. Or it'd be like, someone would be asked a programming question, and then we would just go down and everyone would talk about that programming question on the radio. And you have other ones that are for new hams. There's the new hams network that's on Extended Freedom as well. It's literally set up, if you don't know what to do, you've got no idea what to do with your radio, you're brand new, join this network, and the lovely guy that runs it will pass it to you, and if he hears you struggling, and you're like, oh, that guy just said a Q code, what's that? You don't feel as bad because you're surrounded by a bunch of guys that are new, and will kind of walk you through it. There's a whole bunch of these nets that exist, and a lot of them have moved to digital because the voice quality is better, it's easier to get a lot more people involved, and it's super cheap to get involved with because these things cost, I'm sure this whole thing cost me like 80 quid or something. So the hat, if you've already got a Pi to put the hat on, I'm sure it's only like 40 quid or something, 50 quid or something for that hat. So digital voice modes are fun. For you guys in the room, if you're into, or would like to get into reverse engineering protocols, this is a good place to start because these are well-known protocols. Some of them are closed, some of them are open, but they're all got some level of documentation online, and there's a lot of this in the air being sent around. So you're going to be able to capture this stuff and play with it legally, whereas a lot of the other protocols that you want to play with, your SDRs and stuff like that, you're skirting the law, or you're having to work with what you've got inside your house that you control, which just isn't all that fun. You don't have a lot of like interesting stuff. So you could go into this blind and be like, okay, I don't know how to reverse engineer protocols, but I'm learning it. I've got GNU Radio. I've got a tutorial that's going to show me how to do this stuff. I'm going to figure out how M17 works. And I'm going to try and see if I can personally, on my own, just decode this and figure it out and reverse engineer the protocol myself. Build that skill up so that you can then use that for an unknown radio that you get for some client that you're working with, right? And you can do that for voice, and you can do that with data, and I think that's like super useful. It's been really handy for me because whenever I see a new technique, a new hack, a new way of thinking when it comes to like hacking radios, I go straight to one of these and start messing with one of these because I can legally do it and do whatever I want with it. And I'm not going to cause anybody any problems. I'm not getting any trouble. I'm working on the bands that I'm supposed to be in. I don't have to use a hacker F that's only sending out a few milliwatts. I can use a full big radio that's sending out a lot of data. I can capture real data online from the air where people are actually speaking to each other and see if I can pull out the voice codec from that communication, which is a lot of fun. Other thing you can do is television. So SSTV is a format for sending images over the radio. This is one of the ways that Apollo missions sent images back to mission control. So you can do this, and you can also receive this from some pretty cool places, and you can decode this with software pretty easily on any radio, and again, just a sound card. This is what you need. And when I keep saying sound card, I don't mean a sound card in your laptop. You need a second sound card, because your first sound card has got to be playing system sounds and stuff like that, and just messing up all your radio stuff. Second USB sound card that's dedicated to the task, and you get some dedicated devices for this that are designed for this kind of work. They've got all the right tolerances and latencies and stuff within the device to make it useful. So get one of them. Don't try to do it with a sound card in your device. It doesn't work, or it just causes you nothing but headaches. We also have packet radio, where you can basically have a modem over the radio. People use this for sending emails and stuff from remote locations. APRS, which we will talk about shortly. BBS systems exist on the radio still. And email, so WinLink email used to be pretty common over HF. And again, if you're network focused, you've got all that sort of knowledge, this is a great area to play in, and kind of build up your skills and muck around and learn about every layer of the stack, right? Because you've got the whole layer, right? You've got everything to mess around in. This is one of my favourites. So APRS is one that I use. So this is kind of built on packet radio, and what it does is it lets you send GPS positions, weather, and short messages through digipators that you find all over the place, like here, because this is also a digipater as well as the voice radio that it was doing. It also digipeats, so you can send APRS to this device, and it will send it up to the internet to aprs.fi, so that people can see where the device is. Let's see its actual locations. We can use it for SOTA and POTA, or RayNet. You guys probably don't know those words yet. Hopefully not. I'll teach you what they are in a second. There's a lot of them. These are the devices around us here just now. I took this picture last week from the aprs.fi website. WX is weather stations, D is digipators, and if you find a little guy, can't see any, that's someone running around mobile. These are boats that have APRS on them, and some boat has a digipater on it, apparently. More boats out here. So it's used a lot for maritime, it's used a lot for weather reporting, and it's used for some of the outdoor activities that I'm going to talk about in a bit. But these are all around you. Right now, digipaters within a few hundred meters of where we are that you can access, you can play with, because if they're on here, they want to be found, right? They're publishing their location and their frequencies. So if you click on any one of these, it'll tell you the frequencies, how to access it, what you need to do with it. These are there to be played with. That's what they're for. The weather stations usually can't be, because they're just there to give you the weather, but the digipaters are generally open for amateur radio operators to play with. There's another digital mode. I mentioned it earlier, Morse code. We call it CW in amateur radio, which is either continuous wave or carrier wave, depending on who you speak to, but we generally call it code or CW in amateur radio. And I'm a lifetime member of the Long Island CW Club, because when I learned amateur radio, I had a massive need for Morse code. Like, I actually needed to learn it for some of the activities that I did. I had no idea what I was getting into when I first got licensed. I didn't think I would ever learn Morse code. It seems like such an outdated, useless way of communicating. I could understand learning it for fun, but I learned it because I had an actual need to learn Morse code for something that I wanted to do, and I'll talk about that when we get to the slide on it. You used to have to be at a level of, I think it was like 12 words per minute in the UK, and similar in the US, to even get your license. But it took it out a long time ago. So you don't need to learn Morse code to get licensed, but once you get licensed, you might find yourself falling into the trap like me further down the line, where you will learn it. And if you do, Long Island CW Club is the place to go. These guys have daily Zoom meetings where you join the Zoom meeting and they teach you Morse code. And the way they've designed it is fantastic, because it's done in a carousel process, right? So every week you join, they'll be doing 3 letters. That's it. And then the next week they'll be doing the next 3 letters in a circle. So no matter when you join, you're only doing the free letters from now. And then the second half of the class will be last week's free letters. So if you weren't here last week, you do the first half of the class, you leave, you come back next week you do the full class. And that's it. And that's how you learn Morse code. You just do it in. And then by the time you've done 2 weeks, you've got words. With 6 letters, you can make a lot of words. So you start doing words, you start doing call signs, you got it, and then you go up to the next level, and it's a little bit harder because in the next level, the next carousel, you've got all the previous carousels, letters that you learned, so you have to know all them, and then you do the next ones, and that's how they teach it to you. And it's done over Zoom. From day one, you're sending and receiving Morse code over Zoom with like a Morse code acoustic sender that will just beep. So you can do it, and if you don't have one, they'll just get you to tap the mic to send it out. It's like a fantastic way to learn, and all the people that run the courses are fantastic and lovely. And if you look up on YouTube, there's loads of information about it, loads of people talking about it, and you can see like some of the classes on YouTube as well. You're probably not all that excited about learning Morse code, but you might be later on. So a lot of you guys may be thinking about the security that's involved in all of this, right? Because I've said there's a GPS, they know where you are, you can talk around the world, people are using it for email. Not only is there no authentication and no encryption, it's against your licensing conditions to encrypt or authenticate anything. If you send anything out over these bands, it's got to be open. You don't have a choice. That's an international rule. It's not just in the UK, it's everywhere. So your APRS stuff, FD8 contacts, repeaters, email, it's all wide open. So someone could just grab my call sign, go out and pretend to be me if they wanted to. And there's nothing physically within any of the amateur radio protocols that would prevent anyone from doing that. Building your own stuff is intrinsic to amateur radio. It's a huge part of what we do. So there are a few things that you can build. So the Morserino was one of the first things I built in amateur radio, and it's a device that lets you practice Morse code. So it'll send and receive Morse code for you, give you little games and little techniques to play. The QRP Labs kit are little radios that you can build. So you can get like a voice radio, or you can get a CW only radio, and you can build a whole radio from a kit. And that's the best way to start, from the kits. And then you can then build out. If you're more technically minded, you can build out. I've got like some good electronics background and knowledge, so I can go fairly quickly beyond kits. My Morse code sending device was just built up to output for a speaker, and I modified that to work with my radio. So there's a whole bunch of hacking like that you can do in amateur radio. So you've got like a hardware knowledge or hardware background. There's a whole bunch where you can learn your skills, apply the skills that you've got, and the QRP Lab stuff is some of the best kit for just having a nice self-contained, solder up a few things and get a working device, and a real sense of accomplishment. And then once you kind of build up some confidence with electronics kits, you can kind of build out. And these aren't like kids kits. These are functional radios that you can really use out in the real world. Once you built it, you can use it on amateur radio and make contacts. They're real radios. And they do everything you need to do. I do not have one of these, but I'm about to get one because of CW. It's small and useful for what I need for CW. The other thing that you can build is antennas. I've built a lot of antennas. I mentioned earlier the wavelength is like super important. And this is why when you're building an antenna, you kind of need to know the lengths of kind of what you're building. So this was the very first antenna that I built. It was strapped to our decking with Jubilee clips, and this antenna is essentially, so this is just a fiberglass pole, like a fishing pole basically. It goes up here, 10 meters high. We have a piece of speaker wire going along here, and a piece of speaker wire going up there. That's the entire antenna. There are no active parts in this antenna. So if I step to the side, that's it. That's the entire antenna. So this here is connected to the outer braid of the coax, and this here is connected to the inner conductor of the coax. So this bit goes up, and this bit goes out. So this is an L-shaped antenna for HF. And because it goes up 10 meters, it's quarter of a wavelength on 40 meters, it's half a wavelength on 20 meters, and it's a full wavelength on 10 meters, right? So when you're building that antenna, and you know the size of this, and you know the wavelengths that you're dealing with, I know that that's now going to be resonant on 3 bands, at least 3 bands. I could get to work on more with some fiddling around and some extra knowledge. That's how simple antenna building is. You just hook up a wire to your radio, separated by a terminal block, no active components, and I made my very first HF contact with this to Germany on a radio similar to this one. Not this one, because I sadly sold the radio that I had. And I was super excited about that. Because I built this out of speaker wire, threw it up on that thing, and I was speaking to Germany that day, which was a lot of fun. And it's really easy to do. So you can kind of get into this. It's cheap, it's easy, there's not a lot of work. I've made more complicated antennas since then, and I've got a lot more complicated antennas available to me. But the simplicity of knowing that you can just take a piece of wire, throw it in a tree, and speak around the world, and you know how it works. You can build it from scratch. And because I've now told you about the wavelengths in this antenna, so this is 10 meters, and this is 5, everyone in this room can go home and build this, right? It's extremely simple, and it gets you around the world. I eventually managed to get as far as China with this. I got Russia and China the next day after I got Germany. So my first ever amateur radio, that was my first contact outside of the UK, was Germany. And I got Russia and China shortly after that with this on a radio like this, running off a battery in the garden of this house. I spoke earlier about the shape of the antenna and how it projects out. So that's an L-shaped antenna, and that will have a specific way that the radio waves come out. Radio waves don't come out in a circle, they don't come out in a spiral. They come out in different directions based on the shape of your antenna, the material that the antenna is made of, and what orientation you have that antenna in. So you can have an inverted L, you can have an L, you can have an inverted V, you can have a V, you can have a Yagi antenna, you can have a dipole, you can have all sorts of antenna designs, and they all have different graphs. So there's free software and paid software that lets you design this on your computer. So if you want to do that, you can design it out by just drawing lines and be like, what if I just put like a copper pole here? I don't have any speaker wire. What if I use the copper pole instead and just like solder a wire to it? What would happen? You can do it in the software. You can plan it out, see what it would do, and see if it's going to be a reasonable antenna, and then you can build it with the stuff that you've got. And you now know what direction to shoot this antenna. Because if you want to speak to someone over here, probably want to turn that antenna around, right? It's kind of pointing in the wrong direction. So you get that information from these antenna analyzer software that will help you build it. And they're quite hard to learn and use, but once you learn the basic functions that you need, it can be quite easy to. Most of the time I don't do this. Most of the time I just build the antenna and test it. But this can be quite fun to just kind of build up all sorts of crazy antenna designs. What I learned from my crazy antenna designs was the antennas that guys were building 50 years ago, they were fine. Just use their designs. There's no need to go crazy. So we're now getting into section to what I actually do primarily with amateur radio. So we've done legacy stuff, here's all the things I think are super interesting. If you're of a hacker mindset, you want to build stuff, you want to break stuff, these are interesting parts of the hobby you want to get into. This is what takes my time up. The next few slides are the things that I actually do, all by accident. After I got licensed and I was looking at all the other things you can do with licensing, I found this stuff. So, if you guys have seen disaster movies, or like The Walking Dead, Stranger Things, whenever there's a disaster, they'll like run to the guy who's got like an amateur radio's house, right? And he'll be like calling out in some random frequency to see if anybody's out there, right? That's not what would happen in real life, in any country in the world, and especially not in the UK, because we have a plan. Amateur radio operators have a plan. If the entire internet goes down, if the infrastructure in the UK goes down, if the zombie apocalypse comes, I live in Scotland, I'll be fine. You guys are gone, but we'll be fine. We have a plan, and RayNet's the plan. So RayNet are the UK's volunteer emergency radio service, and I joined these guys shortly after getting licensed. And what we do is we wait if any severe event happens, and we provide support communication for the UK. We work with the police, we work with the NHS, we work with first aid organisations, and we're part of their incident response plan. So the police's incident response plan, our local council's incident response plan has us as part of it. So when everything is gone, when they have nothing left, we'll be out with our batteries and our radios, and we'll get the UK communicating. And we have one in every county. We have an organisation, like a sub-organisation of RAINET in every county. So I'm in the Fife organisation. I work with the Perth and Kinross organisation guys pretty regularly, but we have people all up and down the country prepared to do this. And we've got infrastructure in place that's not tied to the grid. It's battery backup, generator based, and radio based. So if all the communication goes down in the UK today, all of the emergency services can still communicate regardless of what they've got in their offices, regardless of how that fails. And we've done it in the time that I've been involved in Scotland. I don't know if you guys remember, there was a massive storms that we all had across the country. I think it was like last year or the end of the year before, when we were like massive storm hit the UK. That caused huge power outages across Scotland. And one of the hospitals in Scotland lost power and their backup generator failed. And because of that, they had a choice between communications or hospital functions, and they shut down communications and kept hospital functions running, and then they got help from us. And then they also got help from the 4x4, volunteer 4x4 groups, which are also all over the UK, who were ferrying nurses and doctors back and forward because all the public transportation was down, because again, the power was gone, right? So there was no public transportation, no communication, and you had these two volunteer groups that are sat behind the UK's infrastructure, ready to pick up if anything goes wrong, and we have done it a couple of times. But that doesn't happen very often. So how do we check that we can do this stuff? Our batteries work, our radios work, we know what each other looks like. Obviously we could do training and stuff, right? We can do training nights and all that kind of thing. We can meet up and we can play pretend, right? We can go crazy prepper, right? This is getting real crazy prepper territory. I am a crazy prepper. It gets worse than this, guys. So how do we stay prepared? Well, this is how we do it. This was the half marathon at Loch Leven a couple of weeks ago. The first aid team needs to communicate around the loch where we have this half marathon, and we do loads of events throughout the year: triathlons, half marathons, cycling events, all sorts of stuff. And the first aid teams use WhatsApp and phones, and sometimes PMR, and that's just not quick enough. So what we do is, everywhere where you see a little blue box and a little purple box, we've got an amateur radio operator stationed, and up at control we've got the big mast stationed up there. So you'll have me in my car, or me by the beach with a radio, and we do the communication for the first aid teams. And this helps us because we get a donation from the race organisers, you know, as part of the fees that people pay for the races. Some of that comes to us and helps with our equipment. And it helps first aid teams because they've got reliable communications, and we've helped like in some really serious situations. And it's like giving back to the community as well, right? So I've done a lot of, in the past, I've done a lot of obstacle courses and stuff, and I did marshalling at these events, Tough Mudder, Spartan and things like this. And I love doing that kind of thing. So this is similar to that, but I'm providing the radio communication. So I'm getting to play with radios all day. I'm getting to give back to the community. I'm having fun with the guys, the other radio guys that I'm friends with. So it's a good day out, and you're kind of giving back at the same time. And then Jim, our fearless leader, he has an electric bike with his radio on the back of it. So the battery for his bike and the battery for his radio is the same battery. He's got that hooked up. And so if it was a half marathon, he's not going to run that. He'll fly along the back with his bike and make sure everyone's safe at the back of the marathon, keeping communication with us. We know how many runners there are, we know where they are, how everyone is. If anyone gets pulled off by first aid, we know what everyone's doing. And it's like it's a good feeling doing that work. It's great to get out and kind of do it at the weekend, and it builds up our skills and it lets us test out our capabilities. And this is our mobile mast, so we take this thing, it's 100 metres, take that out to the event, hook that up as a mobile repeater. So in the same way that the repeaters I told you previously work, This works in exactly the same way, and we all connect through that and communicate with each other. If it's close enough to our existing repeaters that we've got up in hills, so that if any of you guys are into racing, you'll know the Knockhill racing circuit. So this repeater is up on the hill near Knockhill, and we also have another one elsewhere in Fife at an undisclosed location, and these give us full coverage across all of Fife. So these are not open for other amateurs to use. These are only for RayNet to use for emergency situations and our events. So you can see our ability to communicate is much higher than a first aid team with like a PMR radio or something, right? Or using WhatsApp. We're much quicker, much faster, much more reliable, all battery powered. So no reliance on any infrastructure whatsoever. So if we're out there doing an event and there's like a massive event and all the infrastructure goes down, we wouldn't even notice because we're not relying on it in any way for the communication. And it just feels good having that capability to kind of go out and do that. This is the police headquarters in Glenrothes in Fife, so it's the headquarters for our region. We have a mast on there as well. The headquarters for Fife Council, we have a mast on there as well. And every other region you go to, the other RayNet groups will have similar working relationships with police and the council and stuff like that, so that they can keep this communication going. It's taken super seriously. And so there's a super serious side to our infrastructure and what we do and how we help people, and then there's a fun side of kind of getting out and doing all this stuff with our mates and helping each other out, which I think if you want to get away from your computer screen for a bit and still work with technology, this is a lot of fun. And in the summer I do maybe probably somewhere between half a dozen and a dozen events split across multiple weekends every year for RayNet just during the summer seasons, and then during the winter we might do some training or something to kind of keep our heads in the game, because no one's doing triathlons and stuff in the winter in Scotland. We also do some other outdoor stuff. So Parts on the Air is, so this isn't emergency communication, this is just what you can do as an amateur. I do a lot of this. So this is going out to a local park and using your radio there. Like this. So this is the Forth Bridge in Scotland, and this is me out with one of my antennas making contacts, and this is where my signal went to on that particular day to the people that I was out. And you do this for internet points, basically. So you go out, you make 10 contacts from the park, you submit it to the POTA website, you get your points for it. That's it. It's the whole reason for being. But it's a good reason to get out. It's a good reason to go to parks that you probably wouldn't generally go to. You can do it at your local park, but go to a park you've never been to before, or go somewhere interesting and kind of do it from there. And again, it's outdoor operating, so you can nerd up on your batteries, right? You've got battery chemistry that you can look at, you've got battery boxes, all that kind of thing that you can build up. You've got logging, so you can kind of log all the stuff you've done, because you need to submit who you contacted to get your points, so you have to log that. So some people do it on paper. There's a really good app for it on your phone. You can kind of do it on your phone. Fantastic and a lot of fun. These pictures were taken by my friend Billy, who's also into photography, and he was out taking pictures of dolphins at the same time, because where this is, there's like a firth right next to it, and there was dolphins in it that day. So I'm making radio contacts, and he's leaning over the edge getting pictures of dolphins while he's out. My other friend is a drone operator, so if you've got someone who's into drones, they can come out, take pictures with their drones, do stuff like that whilst you're working on the radio. Lots of cool stuff that you can do. Got to skip that. This is another park with my dog, and this is a different antenna from the one that you saw. So this is an inverted V antenna. You can't really see the antenna, but it's kind of coming down here, and there's another one going down there. And that same pole that you saw that was attached to my decking, it folds down to here, and the telescopic pole comes down to here. So I just carry that pole, and the rest of the stuff, you'll see that it packs up quite small. Someone else took a picture of me that day. So this was screenshotted by my friend Debbie, and she sent it to me because she knew I was out on my radio that day. So the downside of doing it out in the park is you look a little bit weird. I mean, one of my radios has this antenna on it, which, I mean, No prizes for looking stylish, right? It's very tactical to run around with this thing. So yeah, I upset some of the natives with this one. So be careful of that if this is what you decide to do. But so the first antenna, the one that you saw at the bridge, packs down into this and folds up. So that case folds in half. Carry it, and I can take that wherever. The other antenna that you just saw folds down to this and then packs into that bag. So it's that entire antenna packs into that small bag, and then I have the pole, and I just use the pole as like a walking stick when I'm walking. So it's not a lot to carry there. And then the radio that I had for these, everything I needed for that radio was this radio here, and all the kit that I need, even my notepad, everything was in this bag. So there's one small bag inside my backpack, that bag there. So I've got this, that bag's about the same size as this bag, it's about that size. A pole, and that's it. That's all you really need to go out and do parts on the air. And I know what you guys are thinking. Well, if that's all there is, we could do it up a hill, right? And you're right, you could do it up a hill. So a sister hobby to Parts on the Air, it came before Parts on the Air, so big sister, is Summits on the Air. Exactly the same philosophy, except you don't need 10 contacts, you only need 4, because it's really cold up in Monroe in Scotland. So make your 4 contacts get off the hill as quick as you can. So this is me again up that hill, and you might see the same dog hiding down here, doing the same thing. So this is pretty good because now you've got a reason to get up the hill, right? And carry a battery up, right? Now, who doesn't want to carry a bunch of batteries up a hill, right? So you get up the hill, but now you've got this, right? Constraints. Now you want your kit to go down, right? So now you've got yet another thing to nerd out about, right? Small kit, right? Get it as small as you possibly can. Small battery, small radio. Do you know how you make the smallest radio for communication? Learn Morse code. Morse code radios are smaller than voice radios. This is why I had to learn Morse code, because I didn't want to carry a big battery up a radio. I'm carrying enough up a hill. I need a small radio. It's too heavy, far too heavy for me to take up. This is why I learned Morse code, because I was like, well, when I get up there, I want to make my contacts, but if I've got to carry like, you know, a massive battery, huge antenna, a big radio, a microphone to plug into the radio, I don't need all of this. I want a small kit and just a little beeper to like beep to the people that are out there. So I literally started learning Morse code, because when I got up this hill, I was like, yeah, I'm not doing that again. But it's a lot of fun. So this is up there, and here's the contacts that I made. So up here on that day, with this radio and that tactical antenna, I made a contact from here to round about here, which isn't exactly where these guys are, because where these guys are showing is actually their home locations, but they weren't at home, they were on Scaffold Pike when they contacted me. So line of sight from this hill here, Benarty Hill, to Scaffold Pike is 112 miles on a handheld radio. And that's the longest contact I've made on just a handheld. That was exciting. It was hard to do. They could barely hear me, I could barely hear them. But we got the contact, I got their details, they got mine. It was enough for us to get the points. And if you contact someone who's on a hill, and you're on a hill for someone that's on the air, you get extra points. So it's great. On that same day, MM7MOX, who is Andy, and MM0UHR, who is Chris, they were both running up a hill in the Pentlands, and they were like 30 minutes ahead of me, and I wanted to get the points from them as well. And I could hear them on my radio as I was going up the hill, but you have to be in the activation zone to get the points. It's 25 metres away from the summit of the hill with no open contour lines, so you have to be in a closed contour, so there's no other peaks in between you and the peak that you need to get to when you're speaking. So I could hear these guys, and I was like, Chris, how long you got to be up there? Because I want to get these points. And he's like, oh, we're going to be leaving in 15 minutes. I'm like, I'm 20 minutes away from the top. And he's like, can you get there in 15 minutes? I'm like, no. But I ran up the hill as fast as I could, died at the top, called Chris, and got the points. So there's a lot of fun to be had, and both Chris and Andy are people that I know fairly well. I've never laid eyes on these guys, because they live across the water from me. So I've never met them. But they go out a lot of the weekends, and I've got alerts set up on some of the apps. So if I know they're going to be up a hill at 1 o'clock, and I'm planning to be up another hill at 2 o'clock, well, I'll just change my schedule and go up about the same time as them, so then we can all get extra points, right? We can see what's going on, because you can put into the app where you plan to be at what time and what frequency, so that other people can try and arrange to be there. And what happens to me is there's a guy in Italy that's got me in his app, and if I put that I'm going to be in a particular place at a particular time on a particular frequency, when I'm setting my radio up, he'll call me before I even call out and be like, is anyone there? He'll like call me and say like 2 Mike 0 Oscar Delta Echo, are you there? Before I've even got my notepad out, because he's looking for me because he's trying to get the hills and stuff that I'm going up into, and he's in Italy. So there's a couple of guys in Italy, Germany, and the Netherlands who I will always get contacts with when I go up, because I've had contacts with them before, we've had good conversations, so they've put me into their alerts app and they know I'm coming. So you make so many friends doing this, so many interesting people that you would never have met. You'd never have met them any other way. And now you've met them through something that you're like super interested in. But you guys are thinking that's not high enough, right? I knew that. I knew you'd be thinking that. I can tell. Like literally everyone in the room's thinking, you're right. It's not high enough. We can go higher. So there are low Earth satellites that have repeaters on them. And you can connect to these satellites and they will send your signal back out on another frequency to other amateur radio operators, which is pretty cool. And they work in pretty much the same way as any other repeater that works on the land. And what's good about them is they're also, you're allowed to use them for POTA contacts and some on-air contacts. You're not allowed to use land repeaters for those contacts. They have to be direct, but you're allowed to use these repeaters for them. There's a couple of websites, Geopredict and Heavens Above, where you can see like where the satellites are going to go. But what most people do is they use like a Yagi antenna, right? So a Yagi antenna is like if you think of a standard TV antenna, old school terrestrial TV antenna. It's basically a Yagi. So they have those Yagi antennas in their hand with a little handle. They have one of these handhelds, because this is all you need. You don't need a powerful radio. You need a really low powered radio, because it's line of sight, right? Straight up. Low powered radio, Yagi antenna, point it at the sky, and what they do is they just mount the phone on the antenna with the app on it, tracking the satellite, and then you just follow it. And then the cool part is, you have to adjust for Doppler, right? Because it's moving fast away from you and moving fast towards you. So as it's moving towards you, you have to adjust for Doppler, and as it's moving away from you, you have to adjust for Doppler. So you've got to have two VFOs, two radio channels on your radio, one for listening, one for sending, and then you have to adjust as you're going so that you can hear it clearly as it's coming through. Otherwise, it'll be distorted. You don't have to. You can do it without adjusting for Doppler. I just think it's pretty cool that you have to adjust for Doppler as you're doing it. And I also think it's pretty cool that you can do it with this and a tape measure antenna. You can make a Yagi antenna out of tape measures and do this. So you can get in a situation where you can do this, all the technology you need to do this for less than £100. Easily less than £100, and you can speak to satellites. But there's something bigger up there. The biggest satellite, the one with the people on it, right? They have an amateur radio repeater on the ISS for us. It was put there by the ISS for us to use. So it's been up there for us to use. So you can send a signal to the space station and back down to other amateur radio operators, and it just does not get cooler than that. And that is super busy. So if you listen into this, so if you do anything from this talk at all, just go listen to these frequencies, put them on, wait for an ISS pass, and listen, and you just hear a bombardment of call signs because everyone's trying to make contact through the ISS. But it gets even cooler. You can speak to the astronauts. They generally don't speak to amateur radio operators or other members of the public, but they do speak to kids. So ARIS will go out with licensed amateur radio operators, will go out to schools, set up a time to speak to the astronauts, set up the amateur radio equipment at the school, and then as they pass over, they'll send and receive questions to the astronauts from the kids. So if you've ever seen kids asking questions of astronauts, this is how it's done. It's amateur radio operators that are doing it, and it's ARIS that set it up. That's pretty cool. But I know what you guys are thinking. there's something higher up there. You can bounce it off the moon, right? And again, it's not all that difficult. It's a lot more difficult than ISS, a lot more difficult than speaking to people normally. You do need a reasonable sized antenna, but you're still just in the region of a couple of £100 to make this work. It's not thousands of pounds to make this work. It's not a huge antenna array. It doesn't take over your whole house. It's a small dish similar to like what you would use for receiving, old school satellite TV. That's what it is. That's all you need. And you can bounce stuff off the moon and have it come back to Earth. And generally we use digital modes for this just because of the latency. It's a 2.5 second, round trip. Takes a long time. Can't really have a voice conversation with 2.5 seconds of latency. It's kind of hard to do. So we use digital modes, stuff that's below the noise floor, so that we can really pick that signal up because it's really weak. By the time it hits the moon and comes back. So if something wasn't high enough, then the moon's pretty good, right? But I know what you guys are thinking, right? I'm only kidding. The moon's enough, guys. I'll give you the moon in this presentation. So we'll finish this off with how to get licensed, right? So this is all the cool stuff that you can do if you get licensed. These are all the cool things that you can work on. This is all the fun that you can have. I'll do all the outdoor stuff that we mentioned. Rainette, POTA, and SOTA take up a lot of my. If it's sunny and it's nice, and we've got nothing planned that weekend, I'll go off and do that. I'll go out on my bike, I'll go out on my motorbike, go out in my car, I'll go out on foot. My dog, obviously, she comes with me everywhere to do this stuff. I build a bunch of antennas. I sit with my radio scanning all day long, a whole bunch of different interesting frequencies. There's a couple of parts of the hobby I haven't even mentioned because there's just so much. It's massive, and I'm hoping that I've introduced to you guys parts of this hobby that you just weren't aware of, and maybe ignited some interest into a part of the hobby that's interesting for you that you might want to get licensed for, because that's the whole point of the presentation, is to get you licensed. So to get licensed, 35 quid gets you 25 watts on the amateur bands. It's a 26 question multiple choice exam, and it's easy. If you're technically minded, if you already know the difference between FM and AM, you could probably pass this. If you could calculate Ohm's law, if I draw the triangle for you and give it to you, because that's what they do. They draw it for you, they give it to you, you put it on a paper and say, can you calculate this? That's what you need to do. I couldn't remember Ohm's law off the top of my head, but when they drew the triangle in front of me and said, can you calculate this? I was like, oh yeah, I can do that. So most candidates take like 2 to 4 weeks. You can do it a lot quicker if you've already got a technical background. If you've done some SDR stuff, you've got radio stuff, and the things that I've just said to you make sense, you could probably just pass out the foundation really easy, because the foundation doesn't have a lot of technical stuff. The only things in the foundation license that you'll need to learn will be licensing conditions and what makes up a call sign, and a few other bits around that you need to learn, because it's just like facts that you don't know. But the technical stuff, if you've got that technical knowledge, you may not need it. If you do, the Essex Ham course on YouTube, it's just a YouTube course, everything you need is in it. You go through that course, you'll pass in no time. I did it before I did my foundation. And then there's a foundation license manual. And the same manual, this thing's a pamphlet, it's like about this thick. Everything you need is in that too. So you've got that book, this course, you could go through both of them in a weekend and go pass this exam. It's that easy. And that's it, you're licensed. Nothing more to do. You can do Rainette, you can do SOTA, you can do POTA, you can do digital modes, you can do HF. In America, the lowest level of licensing, I forget what it's called, but the lowest level of licensing, you don't have HF, so you can't go and propagate around the world and stuff until you get the next level up. But here you can. It's all open to you. There are a couple of restrictions. There's some parts of the bands that you can't use. Not super relevant. All the interesting stuff, all the fun stuff, all the popular stuff, you get access to for this. This is how easy it is. If you want to take it a little bit further, you can do the intermediate. This gets you up to 100 watts. So I did my foundation and then I immediately did my intermediate, because at the time it wasn't 25 watts. It was smaller. They changed it in 23, I think, or 22. They changed the licensing slightly, put everyone's power limits up. But I did my intermediate straight away because I needed slightly more power. But I have never operated over 100 watts, and I've never had a need to, and I've operated across the entire world. Most of the stuff I do is less than 10 watts because again I'm up a hill and I don't want to take a massive powerful radio and an amplifier and a giant battery to get all that power out. I just want to use the minimum power I can to make that contact, you know, wherever the contact's going to be. Full gets you up to a kilowatt, and all the amateur brands. And I was going to get my full because previously, the intermediate, you weren't allowed to supervise non-amateurs using the radio, but they changed that at the same time they changed the power limits. So now I am. If someone else wants to borrow my radio as an unlicensed person, they can use it and use my call sign as long as I'm supervising. That didn't used to be the case, and that's why I was going to get my full license. Now the only reason for me to get a full license is because you can operate from abroad with permission from the country that you're going to. You have to kind of, different countries have different rules, but you follow the rules and you can operate from abroad. Just now I can't. I can operate within the UK territories and that's it. I can't operate anywhere outside of the UK. You can also do a direct to full for like 95 quid. If you're technically confident, you're a radio person, you're a hardware person, that's the way to go. I wish I had done that on the first go. I don't think that would have been problematic, and it would have saved me some time, and I could have just went through it. So if you're technically minded, you've got some radio background, that's the way to go to get licensed. Where to start? You guys might have seen WebSDR before. Show of hands if you've ever used WebSDR. Okay, so WebSDR is a piece of open source software and some hardware that literally lets you use radio from someone else's radio remotely. So if you give me a second, I will find one for you. There we go. And that's not coming through.
Switch the output device.
Yeah. Let's change that to HDMI. There we go. Let's change. So you can go to websdr.org and you get a list of all of these software-defined videos that you can just connect to and use. And then when you open one up, like this, you have a video that you can control. And you can change the frequency, and you get a waterfall of what's going on. Now, if you've done any sort of SDR work, you'll have come across one of these. You'll have paid around and listen to some stuff. But you might not know what to listen to. And this is what you listen to. Parts on the Air. You go to the Parts on the Air website, and you can find everyone who's doing Parts on the Air just now, because we spot ourselves, so other people spot us and say, I saw this guy, he was in this part, on this frequency, and it pops up here, right? So we've got Kilo 8, Whiskey Alpha Golf, he was last here 9 minutes ago, he's in Clear Creek State Park, and he's on this frequency here. So you can just go, grab that, take it to here, type it there, and listen to these guys doing Parts on the Air. And you can learn what they're doing with Q codes, what they're doing with their call signs, how they sign off, how they talk to each other, what a Parts on the Air contact sounds like. So before you ever go out and do it, you can hear the whole thing here. There's YouTube videos on this as well, but you can hear that it's live. And you can go home tonight and just do this. So the website is pota.app for the POTA stuff, and websdr.org for these WebSDRs. And you can hear a lot of other stuff beyond amateur radio with these. They're not purely for that. But this is a nicer. You can also just scan around the bands and just click on any of these signals and see what it is and try and figure out what it is. But this is a slightly better way to do it. Because you know you're going to get a Parts on the Air person. You know they're going to be doing Parts on the Air. So when you're like trying to Google or use AI to help you understand what it is you're hearing, you've got context, right? You know what it is, right? You know what this guy's doing. So this is a great way to listen and do that stuff tonight for free. And I'll close these down. Maybe not. There we go. Boom. Okay, so no license required, no tools required, no investment required. Go home, hit those two websites, listen to people doing Parks on the Air. Summits on the Air has a similar website, does the same thing, so you can go to Summits on the Air. I generally suggest Parks on the Air if you just want to listen and you're new to this, instead of Summits, because the Summits guys run up to the top, make the contacts, run back down. Whereas the Parks guys, they sit up on a bench, a cup of coffee, they're there all day. There's a massive difference between how they operate. So you'll catch the Parks on the Air guys, because you might go connect to it and the guy's just not there, you don't hear anything, and you have to go find someone else. It'll take you a while to find someone speaking. So the Parks on the Air guys are the better option. If you want to get some hardware, the RTL SDR dongle is what everyone suggests, and I just think it's a terrible way to get in. It's super frustrating, you can't transmit. It's not even a good SDR. If you're going to get an SDR, you guys are probably going to be using that SDR for something more interesting related to work. Get a better one. Get like at least a Hacker F or something like that, or something more modern than a Hacker F. That's what I've got, and it's functional for what I do. IOActive, when we do our actual hardware testing, we have serious equipment. Get something that's in the £300 range. That's good kit, because if you're going to end up potentially using it for work as well. But you can get one of these dongles and you can listen. You just can't transmit. The Baofeng UV5Rs are on the floor, because I put this on it. These are quite controversial because of the fact that they are terrible. So the real problem with these, so I bought this one because I had a frequency counter in it and I had a real need for a frequency counter. Most people buy them because they're cheap. And the cheapness that's going to cause you problems in this is the lack of filtering. So there's two levels of filtering that are terrible in these. One is the input filtering, so you get a lot of interference from other signals, therefore you don't hear a lot of stuff that you would hear in some of my better radios. And the output filtering isn't great, so your radio is quite impolite across the bands, and it causes a lot of emissions outside of the frequency that you're speaking on, which would make them technically illegal, but no one's ever tested that to see if that's the case. But I don't like using it. I only use this one for its frequency counter. That's literally the only reason I use it. I don't use it for anything else. What's better is to go to the sort of £80 to £200 range and get one of the FT. So this is the FT4X, which is kind of an older one. This is my first radio. I think this was like £60 when I got this one. This is a nice radio, it was pretty good. So you can get that. This one here is the FT5D. This was like 600 quid when I got this. This does all sorts of crazy stuff. You don't need to invest that much. It's got APRS and digital modes and GPS and all that kind of stuff built into it. Whereas this is a radio. This thing's like does a whole bunch of other stuff. This is my everyday carry radio when I go out to the POTA and all that kind of stuff. This is the one I take. I barely ever use my other radio now, but it was my first radio, so I'm not going to get rid of it. These are UHF, VHF radios, and then HF radios. A bit more expensive. You're going to be 300-400 quid before you can get even a reasonable HF radio, and pretty much all of them are good. You've got the Xiegu G90s and similar ones, which are the cheap Chinese radios. They're not as controversial as the Baofengs because they're actually quite good, and they're SDR radios. So it's a hardware radio, but it's SDR that's in the internals. So it's kind of blurred the lines between SDR and hardware radios when you get these, and they have a great reputation. They're fantastic. So you can see if you get your license for like 30 odd quid and a radio for 100, maybe 200 quid, that's it. You've got everything. Repeaters, SOTA, POTA, satellites. You can speak to satellites. You can speak to the ISS on these handhelds with less than 200 quid of investment, and that's what gets you licensed. You can join RayNet. You can do everything that we've mentioned so far in this presentation on that. That's all you need. So the hardware really isn't that difficult to get into. There are £2,000, £5,000, £10,000 radios. I have no need for any of them and any of the stuff that I do. I have a lot of fun with the stuff that I've got, and none of it's lacking anything. There are no features lacking, nothing like that in anything you got. Your HF radios, sweet spot for them is £400 to £1,000. That's where all the good radios are. And your handheld radios, your sweet spot's £100 to £200. And you can get a shack in the box, that's what this is. So this does HF and VHF, UHF. Does all of that in this one radio. And that was like 400 quid. It's quite an old radio, but it's pretty cheap. They hold their value as well. So that radio was like £500 brand new, something like 16 years ago. And they're still going for like 400, 450 pounds on eBay now. They hold their value really well. So why now? Never been cheaper. The important part is the exam comes to you. So this is one of the reasons I got licensed. I thought I had to go to some amateur radio club, hang around with the old guys, and get my exam done there, which is how you had to do it up until COVID. During COVID, they put the exams online. So me and my friend James, we immediately got licensed because we could just stay home and do it over Zoom. They make you put 2 cameras on for invigilation. You do your exam, great. Amateur allocations are reviewed very often, and the bandwidth, the space on the spectrum is very crushed. You've got so much competing for that, even more so now with the amount of devices that we're creating. We've got Bluetooth, we've got PMR has a space, aeronautical has a space, business radio has a space, the police have a space, the military have a space, and everybody's vying for more and more space. So if we don't use it, we're going to lose it. And I think that this is the original hacker's hobby, is amateur radio. It really is. And I think that people like you guys are the guys that need to go get licensed, they need to get out and do this stuff, because it's super fun. It's going to skill you up in a bunch of areas that are interesting. You've got to meet a bunch of interesting people, very interesting people. And sorry?
Is it, can you do your, direct to full?
Yeah, so I'll repeat the question for the guys on YouTube. So the question was, can you do your direct to full online? Yeah, all of the exams are online. There used to be a practical element to the exams, so you had to actually show them you could use a radio, and they removed that when they put them online. So now you can just do all your exams online, and it's RSGB, Radio Society of Great Britain, that manages the exams on Ofcom's behalf. So yeah, you can just do the whole lot online. Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions here? I can hear you, and I'll just repeat it. So.
There we go. So, I don't see any lights. So, anyhow, it's a case that we heard today from GCHQ through The Guardian, trusted source, that there are lots of campaigns from lots of nations around the world. Are there any sort of background checks that happen on the people on the ham radio network, seeing as it gets used for a bit of civil contingency stuff, as you touched on?
I had something related to that. Never mind, lost it. So the question was, are there any background? So did I get that right? Any background checks for anyone who's involved in amateur radio because of essentially the political climate just now and what's going on, and what GCHQ put out? Was that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. So no, there are no background checks to amateur radio. There have been times that various countries around the world have restricted amateur radio. Obviously, if you're in some sort of war, having a lot of transmitters all over the place is a nice way for someone who's a spy to kind of hide what they're doing. However, in the UK in World War II, we had this thing called Bletchley Park, where they were part of the team that helped break Enigma. They got the messages that they were cracking from amateur radio operators. So amateur radio operators were a sub-team working under Bletchley Park, where they were asked, capture the communication, write it down, submit it to your local operator, he'll bring it in to the girls here, and we'll crack the codes. So they were hugely important as part of that, because I thought that they had, in the UK, I thought that our radios had been taken off us during wartime, when I did my research on this, and I was incorrect. And I knew quite a lot about Enigma and Bletchley Park. Obviously, the type of work that we do, most of the people in this room are probably intimately familiar with even the cryptography that's involved in it. But yeah, apparently amateur radio operators were instrumental in being spies effectively during that time and bringing it in. But it is a great way to hide being a spy. So the other side of that is number stations. Show of hands if you've heard of number stations. Yeah, so number stations are radio signals that are sent out that are effectively one-time pads for operators around the world, and a lot of countries use them. And it's been firmly established in court that this is what they are. They're one-time pads for one-time pad encrypted communication going out over radio to operatives out in the field. So again, having a radio, being an amateur radio, is like operator is a good cover if that's who you are, but it's also kind of suspicious having those radios. So yeah, there's times when that's been helpful to governments in their pursuits, times when it's been slightly suspicious, and even the government themselves used, and because some of these number stations use the amateur radio bands illegally, because the number stations generally don't follow the rules, because A, they're run by the governments in that region, and B, the governments claim that they're not running them. So so they just operate within our bands, causing us problems. If you've never heard of number stations, Ringway Manchester on YouTube is an amateur radio operator who does loads of videos on the history of number stations. He's got recordings of them going back years, and he talks through them, and he's listened to a lot of them himself, done a lot of the research on them and that kind of thing. So if you haven't heard of them, that's a great place to go get knowledge. Ringway, RINGWAY Manchester on YouTube, and he's quite a cool guy to listen to as well. He's got some general radio stuff on his channel too, but his number station stuff, his number station videos, they're quite short, 15-minute videos, something like that, and they're super enlightening about some of the crazy stuff that goes on in that part of the world. I've listened to some of the number stations. I find them incredibly creepy to listen to, but they're pretty cool and pretty interesting part of radio history. They're still there. There's still number stations. They're not as popular now as they used to be, because most of covert communication has found different channels these days. But there are operating number stations right now. The Buzzer, I think, still operates, and a few others still operate. Lincolnshire Poacher doesn't anymore. That was an old one. But if you look those up on his YouTube, you'll get some cool videos. But yeah, that crossover into espionage and spying and the sort of grey lines there are like super interesting. Yeah.
As various wars, countries and things have been popping up, have you noticed any active blocking, decline?
So that's interesting. So you might have noticed in one of my previous slides when I was talking about de-excommunication, I used the word entities, not countries. And that's because in amateur radio we try to be politically agnostic, and we have a definition for what we consider an entity, and most countries fit it, but some don't. So we don't really care whether one country recognises another country as being a country. The international law around amateur radio is pretty well codified, and we have a couple of different regions where the laws apply, and all the countries within those regions have agreed to that law. So because of that, we can communicate freely, even when there's wars going on. We're not restricted. I can speak to Russia today, there's no restrictions. Russia can speak to me, there's no restrictions. We generally don't when stuff's going on. Like they generally don't want to speak to the people in enemy countries, and people here generally don't want to speak to them. It's difficult to have a conversation without falling into some sort of politics. But the way that the international law has been set up, and the way that most countries have set it up, is that they've tried to be politically agnostic, country agnostic, and we use, when we're gathering countries on a map and putting pins on the map and saying, I've contacted every country in the world, we don't say country, we say entities, and that kind of keeps that politicalness out of it. And that's one of the rules on amateur radio is, you don't swear, you don't transmit copyrighted music, you don't talk politics. That's one of the rules.
What do you talk about, like when you talk with Russia or?
Radios, usually.
What?
Radios. So the first thing you ask is, what's your equipment? What's your antenna? What's your radio? And then when you ask that, the guy will go on a rant like I just did about his entire radio career, all the antennas that he's built, all that kind of stuff. So we talk about that quite a lot. And then once you get past that point, if you're like friendly with someone, you talk about everything. You can talk about family and what's going on and that kind of thing and work. But you're on an open channel the whole time. So you generally decide yourself how much you're willing to kind of share publicly. And you basically share the same that you would share on the internet, right? So you won't start giving out names and dates of births and all that kind of thing, but you will just have general chats on the air pretty often. There's a couple of guys that live near me who are friends, and they literally just use it instead of the phone. They just call each other up on the radio every day, just to yap about what's going on, what their wife's doing, where they're going, where they've been, what they're up to. So yeah, it's pretty open, but most chats start with where you are, what equipment you're using, and how much power you're using. Amateur radio operators like to show off how big the power is and how small the power is. Those are the two ends. I've got like 6 kilowatts because I'm in Italy and we can do this. And I'm like, yeah, I'm on the top of a hill with like a wire hanging from my hand with like 1 watt.
Have you done a moon bounce?
I have not done a moon bounce. I was hoping someone would ask that question. So I have a friend who I'm going to go visit this weekend, James, who got licensed at the same time as me. And me and James have a running list of all the ways that we've contacted each other. Because we started contacting each other way back on IRC. So we've done IRC and ICQ and MSN and BBM and wall messages on a Linux box and all sorts. So we have a massive list, and EME is on our list to get done so that we can contact each other on EME. And like, I want to set up a website just called like Ways I've Contacted James, with just like a list of all the communication methods that we've hit each other with. And EME is on. So I haven't done it yet, but when I do, it'll be James that I send the message to. Any more? Okay, thank you so much, guys. Thank you for listening to me. Cheers.